2, 1. Well, thanks, folks, for getting back. We're just about on time. So we have Nicole with us. She's from NOFA, Vermont. And welcome, Nicole. And I guess we're wait to hear from you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I did put a couple slides together just to kind of illustrate, who our certified organic dairy operations are in the state, what they look like, herd size, that sort of thing. So if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen and show you all those slides.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Can you all see that presentation now?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think Mike has a PDF copy too, if people want to see that later. So yeah, my name is Nicole Daney. I'm the certification director for Vermont Organic Farmers. And I thought it would just be a good idea to kind of get on the same page about our organization and what we do really quickly. So Vermont Organic Farmers, we're an LLC and we're owned by NOFA Vermont, that is the nonprofit, right? But we are our own organization and we are accredited by the USDA to do the certification for the organic regulations, right? So we go around the state and we certify farms and processing facilities in the state to the USDA's organic regulations. Some certifiers and Vermont VOF could also certify outside of the state, but we choose, just to certify within Vermont. And we currently certify about 800 organic farms and food processors in the state. And then, of course, NOFA Vermont is a nonprofit organization with kind of a broader mission to promote organic practices, to build a food system in Vermont that's, economically viable, ecologically sound, and socially just. So I just wanted to give people a sense of like how we fit with NOFA and, what our role is as far as organic certification. So I also wanted to give you a sense of the current numbers of organic dairies in the state. So at the end of 2020, we had 169 producers that were certified to produce organic milk. So most of these producers are shipping commercially, but there are some that are, just shipping or just selling raw milk directly to consumers, right? But I also kind of broke these down into the different counties. So you can see, and probably no surprise, that like Addison, Franklin, Orange, and Orleans have, the highest numbers of organic dairy farms in the state. But I also wanted to give you a sense of what that looks like compared to, the state numbers of all the dairies in the state overall. So at the end of 2020, when I looked at the numbers of, total dairies in the state and compared it to the number of total organic dairy farms, we're at 26% of all the dairies in the state are now organic. And, what that also means is these producers are managing about 60,000 acres of, organic hay and pasture and crops, and they're grossing about 63 million on an annual basis. So when we think about the herd size for organic dairies, when I put all the numbers together from what they report to me, they average about 81 milkers per farm. When we take off like the small ones that are like 5 and the really large ones that are like 440, then the median is really more around 68 milkers per farm. So again, that can range anywhere from 5 cows to 440 cows. That's what we're looking at when we look at those 169 producers. And then I kind of broke out the different percentages here, right? So 4% have less than 19 cows, 34% have between 20 and 59 cows, 29% have between 60 and 79 cows, 11% of the farms have between 80 and 99 cows. You get another little jump of 15% have between 100 and 199, and then only 6% have, 200, and the max, our biggest farm, 40. So I point that out just to make the point that, 94% of the organic dairies are still considered small farms, and 6% are, medium farm operations. So when we think again about like why we should be, or why, if you're asking me my opinion on why we should be supporting organic farms, I mean, one of the reasons is because historically, organic has allowed small to medium-sized farms to stay in business and be successful, right? And that still looks to be true now that the majority of our farms are on the smaller to medium-sized scale. So I think that you all have been getting testimony on this already, but I just wanted to make sure that people understood that, the way it's working in the organic industry right now are that, prices are generally guaranteed with like, anywhere from 1 to 3 year contracts. This has been historically important for our certified organic dairy producers because it has allowed them for future planning, right? It has allowed them to do investments because they know that, like, okay, this is what I can count on for a price for my milk. And then, of course, as people have been reporting too, those prices are then based on components, so they can get, more on their butter, fat, and protein and milk quality. So the range that we're seeing is really anywhere between $29 to $35 a hundredweight. If producers are going 100% grass-fed, which means they're not feeding grain, then they get an additional $5 a hundredweight premium. Certainly important to note that when they switch over to 100% grass-fed, their milk production drops considerably as well. So that's why there's also a higher premium for that. So, then I think people have also been giving testimony on this, but I just wanted to make this point as well, that we've actually been seeing an increase in consumer demand for organic whole milk, right? And between 2010 and 2018, the percentage of US residents buying organic milk rose from 4% to 13%. And by 2022, that number is expected to surge an additional 14.3%. So we're seeing an increase in consumers' interest in buying, organic milk. And so, that is something also to take note of. And we did see that as reported. It will be interesting to see what some of the milk processors say this afternoon, but, that they have been seeing increases in demand during the pandemic. We've also been hearing kind of more on an anecdotal basis from like cheesemakers, for example, that they've also, some cheesemakers are reporting an increase in demand too from consumers. So I think the other thing are, in general, more consumers are buying organic foods than in the past too, right? So when consumers talk about why they buy organic food, they talk about concerns regarding their own health, their family's health, the environment, animal welfare, and they have been, the research is showing that they're willing to pay a price premium that's already established in the marketplace for organic, right? So, and then I think the other important note that the kind of marketing research is showing as well is that organic products have shifted, right? From being just like a lifestyle choice of a small share of consumers to being consumed at least occasionally by the majority of Americans now. So, there's this marketing institute here that I've cited that says, during even in the early 2000s, they found that 2/3 of the shoppers that were surveyed, have bought organically grown food. So it's not something that's, I think, and maybe in the past it's been seen as more of a niche market, and it's becoming more mainstream as far as consumer acceptance. And certainly we continue to see consumer demand for wanting, to support organic products. And like I said, specifically organic milk and very specifically organic whole milk. But, we are not immune to issues either, right? And I think you've also been hearing a lot of testimony as to what the issues in the organic industry that we've been seeing over the last couple of years are, right? So one of those is we are also starting to see attrition in the number of organic dairy farms in the state. So on average, we're losing about 5% in the total number of producers a year since 2017, right? So I think prior to that, we had been seeing a growth. Numbers were kind of hovering around the 200 certified organic dairies in the state. So in 2016, that number was 203. And then now in 2020, as I just reported, that number is 169. On the national scale, we're starting to see some consolidation similar to the conventional market, right? We're seeing these large 14,000 cow dairies. And these dairies are often located in places like Texas and Colorado, arid parts of the country that don't necessarily conjure up the image of lush pasture the way, we show these pictures here in Vermont, right? So a lot of people in the industry are suspect that these large operations are meeting the pasture rule, that they're not meeting the requirements that the organic standards have for, feeding even a minimum of 30% of their diet from pasture, right? So that's an issue, and that's a real concern that we're, talking about all the time in the organic industry. I think the other problem with these large operations is typically they're also exploiting a loophole in the organic regulations. So they are, often managing their young stock conventionally and then transitioning them to organic production. So it's just like routine, like, okay, this is how we manage our young stock. We feed them conventional grain and then we transition them over a year and then they can produce organic milk. So, that also puts like producers in Vermont at a disadvantage, for example, because we require that people can only use the transition exemption one time when their conventional producers are trying to come over to organic. So of course, and I think you all received testimony on this too, one of the immediate crises that we're looking at is that there are 27 producers in Vermont that are losing their contract shipping to one of the 4 milk buyers in the state. In this case, Horizon Organic, there's dropping contracts, right? And as of 2022, they won't be re-signing contracts to purchase their milk. So this is a multifaceted problem. We're so thankful that the state is convening this board to think about dairy in the state overall and also having a day to specifically talk about organic. But, there are some ways that potentially the state can play a role in helping to address some of these issues. So this is interesting because I've heard this topic already come up with other folks that have been talking today, right? But one of the questions is how can we utilize more Vermont organic milk in our state, right? And again, I'm sure that you're asking the question, well, why organic? And my answer is like, hey, this is a potential way to allow our small and medium-sized farms in the state to be able to stay in business and hopefully be successful, right? So one of the questions would be like, how can public institutions play a role in supporting these farms, right? We already have the local food purchasing incentive program that was recently passed. If there was a viable Vermont organic milk product that schools could afford, perhaps this program, which currently excludes fluid milk because there was no viable option, like maybe that, this could include the milk. It could include fluid milk so that schools, public institutions like colleges, state colleges, correctional facilities, places that are buying a lot of organic milk or buying a lot of milk would have an incentive to source it, a local organic product. So, also, however, we need to think about what do the public institutions need in order to be able to purchase that milk, right? So, I think Peter Miller mentioned the Grafton facility. Of course, I think people are talking about the Thomas Dairy facility in Rutland, right? Like, could there be a process? How can the state help, basically, to help support a processing facility in the state that maybe could process milk in the way in which the institutions need it, right? So the 5-gallon bulk bags, the 8-ounce cartons, that thing. So that's just the conversation as far as like public institutions with this bigger, broader question of, how can we utilize more of the Vermont organic milk in the state? And then of course, similarly, and this helps, or a lot of these potential solutions would help organic producers, but would also help conventional producers as well, right? do we make Vermont more attractive to the milk processors, right? Like, talking to the milk processors, and we're certainly, considering this as part of the task force that the state has convened. But like, what infrastructure do the milk processors want and need? And how could the state make sure that we have them here, have those facilities here, so that our organic and, conventional dairy producers are more attractive, right? So, that butter making, cheese making, ultrafiltration, like what are the processes that potentially those processors that would be attractive to those processors? And also, how can we support our farmers? And again, this is these kind of ideas would support organic and conventional producers, right? Like what kind of state programs, and I know we've been talking about this, but can exist that reward environmental stewardship, right? Supporting programs that offer business and succession planning, right? Trying to think about creative solutions to keep farmland affordable. And I have to say, I really liked Abby Corse's comment about, thinking outside the box as far as, if we can't, I also am somebody who's like always thinking like, okay, we need to get farmers a better price, right? But maybe there are other ways we can support farmers so that they can farm successfully. Like, how do we support, childcare for farmers, and how do we support healthcare solutions for farmers? Those kinds of options might be other ways the state could play a role in making sure we have that farms can be successful and farmers can be successful. And then, what needs to happen on the federal level, and this is something that VOF and NOFA are, along with many others in the industry, working towards improving, and the issues that we have on the federal level as far as the organic standards, right? So one of the things that we need to do is we need to close this loophole for this origin of livestock rule. And that's the one I talked about that is currently allowing some operations to continually transition young stock from, conventional management to organic management, right? So that loophole should be closed. This one-time transition should truly be a one-time transition, an opportunity for a conventional producer that has their herd established and doesn't want to have to sell that herd, to transition those animals to organic, so that they can produce organic milk. We also need to work on making sure that the National Organic Program, which is housed within the USDA, is enforcing the pasture rule, especially on these large dairy operations. One of the things that we're seeing in Vermont is as the organic industry is getting larger and we're seeing more fraud, the NOP is responding as they should by tightening up the regulations, tightening up enforcement. One of the things that we're seeing, though, is this trickles down to our producers too. In some ways, it's creating a bit of a burden for record keeping and those sort of things for producers that are, in my opinion, are doing it right in the first place, right? So that's something we could think about on the state level too, is how to support our organic producers in being more successful. How do we help? This is certainly something our organization is thinking about, but like, how do we give them more support so they understand how the certification process works, support with the record keeping requirements, understanding what's going to happen at the on-site inspection so that they can be more successful, all of those sorts of things. And then a really big one is on the federal level, there's a program that reimburses the cost of certification or a portion of the cost of certification. And, we're really advocating to get that cost share increased for organic producers. And that's, that's an important piece that we would like to see happen. Oh, and I think that is it. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll stop my sharing.
Well, thank you, Nicole. Are there questions from any of the committee members for Nicole? John?
Hi, Nicole. This is John Roberts. You mentioned that the increase in consumption of organic dairy products, organic food in general, is steadily going up. There seems to be a little disconnect since Organic Valley and others are not sort of clamoring for more dairy products. So can you just help me understand that disconnect?
Yeah, I wish that I understood that disconnect too. And I think Miller mentioned it as well, right? Like we have seen during the pandemic that there's been an increase in the purchasing of organic milk. And yet, you know, Horizon is dropping, for example, these 27 producers in the state. I mean, the reasons that Horizon has said that they're dropping the producers is because I think because of the cost of, picking up to these small farms and the fact that it costs more money to produce organic milk in the Northeast, right? So they can source it cheaper from the Midwest and West and from the larger operations. So, I wish I could answer that question better, I guess, but I do think that's like an interesting discrepancy that it would be interesting to hear what some of the milk processors have to say about that this afternoon.
And one other question about certification. When I worked for the Agency of Ag, I was always interested in going to organic farms and hearing some of them were certified by outside Vermont certifiers. And I wondered if that was a big problem here, instead of, having Vermont farms certified by only Vermont certifiers who are meeting certain standards, whether having out-of-state certifiers who might not understand the dairy industry or whatever. I wondered if that was an issue at all.
Yeah, we are seeing that a little bit more than we have in the past. I don't think we're seeing it so much in the dairy farm scope. We see it another time. I would love to come back and present about organic maple syrup, because we're seeing actually a real increase in the number of organic maple producers that we certify. And in that particular area, we're seeing some maple producers getting certified by out-of-state certifiers. And in those cases, the reason that they're doing it is because it's easier and the standards aren't as strict. So I think that can apply to all production types, but we haven't seen it as much in the dairy. And I think it's because we have like long relationships with our dairy producers here in the state. And often they have relationships with NOFA for the business planning and technical assistance side also. So I think it's something we should always keep an eye on. But at the same, and I think mostly it's an issue if it's not a level playing field, right? Like if there are other certifiers coming into Vermont doing organic certification, we want to make sure that they're holding those producers to the same strict interpretations that Vermont Organic Farmers is using. And, this is a little bit of a radical idea, but something that we could think about too is what it would mean to kind of define organic a little bit more in Vermont from the state level. In the federal regulations for the organic standards, there is an allowance for what's called a state organic program. And typically that state organic program has served as like a sub-enforcer. So you've got the USDA National Organic Program, and then you would have a state organic program. So California has one right now. It does say in the regulations that the state could have potentially stricter standards. And that has not been tested, but that's kind of an interesting thought too, as in the vein of like, how do we distinguish Vermont and our producers, and how do we hope maybe give them a leg up in the marketplace for kind of identifying that they're, really seeing that consumer kind of need and desire for what their vision of an organic producer is, right? Like the Vermont producers are meeting that. So.
Thank you.
John O'Brien.
Thank you, Bobby. Nicole, this is Representative John O'Brien. Just a couple of quick questions. I wondered if in that your statistics on the 169 organic dairy farms in Vermont, does that include goat dairies, or are they a whole separate category for you?
No, that would include like the maybe one or two goat dairies. Yeah.
So I remember Diane Botfeld from the agency saying that I think they were 44 goat dairies in Vermont, something around there. So most of those aren't organic.
And that's because, yes, that's true. And that's because I think that the current market for goat milk is not an organic market. So I'm forgetting the name of the Vermont cheese, the goat cheese that's made here, that's purchasing a lot of that milk, but they don't necessarily sell their product as organic. And sometimes what happens in the cheese world is because they're already receiving a premium for their product, that it's hard for them to get an additional premium, by being organic. But some of our cheese producers are finding that, right? And it sort of also helps them kind of distinguish themselves in a competitive cheese market as well. So.
Yeah, the other question was, I've noticed when I buy, say, Horizon half and half, that it's been irradiated and it's, good until December. And I just wondered where NOFA falls on perishable products that last forever.
Yeah, right. Right. I don't know if we have like an official stance on that, but I think in general, our policy has always been kind of like the less processed food, the better. Right. And I agree, like Horizon has always pushed the envelope as far as like, I think obviously their point is that they're wanting to make sure that their product is shelf stable. But what is really interesting about the organic market is because there's incentives for premium and milk quality, that milk has typically lasted longer on the shelf, right? Because people are incentivized to produce milk with, lower somatic cell counts and that sort of thing. So, I think our general thought is like the less processed food, the healthier that's going to be for the consumer.
Any other questions for Nicole?
Over here.
Dan?
Yeah. Hi, Nicole. Your slides, you outlined that in the past 20 odd years, we had a stable number of producers around 200. And in the last few years, the numbers have come down. So a couple questions. One, where's the overall volume of milk production? Has it stayed relatively constant or has it come down as well?
That is a really great question. I don't know the answer to that because I'm not usually like studying those. I don't collect that information from my producers, but I've been wondering that as well. Like, are we seeing like the farms are getting bigger and producing the same amount but we're losing the number of small farms? My thought is that I don't know this for sure. And I could try to figure out how to do this research because I think it's a really good question. But my thought is that we're probably reducing the amount of volume that's coming from the state because I haven't seen a huge jump in the growth of our producers as far as their number of cows. And I think that's because a lot of them are being asked to, restrict their production. So we haven't seen that change in that way, but I don't have that. I don't have the numbers on that, but I think that's a really great question.
So you anticipated my follow-up question is whether there was just attrition in producers or whether there's some consolidation at the same time. But can I impose on you to see if you can fill out that piece of your testimony and fill out the deck so that, because we're trying to document the configuration of the industry. So it'd be very helpful if we could have that information.
I do want to say, as far on a national scale, yes, we're seeing, I think in organic that the number of producers dropping volume, but in Vermont,
right. Where's Vermont in the trend? And kind of associated is of the 169, can you give some sense of how many are are shipping for fluid or manufacturing as opposed to how many are raw?
Yeah, the majority are the absolute majority are shipping commercially. But I can
Is that,
numbers on
okay,
that.
that'd be helpful too if you, yeah, great. Thank you.
Other questions of any committee members? Leon, if not, Leon, did you have a question for us?
I had a comment. I wanted to tie together for John the fact that Jennifer mentioned that she's been in quota for 4 years, as have we. And that's because Organic Valley has been oversupplied with milk. The pandemic kind of worked down that oversupply to some degree, but now it's actually going the other way because people are back to going to school and going out to eat more, and Organic Valley milk products tend to be consumed at home.
Yeah, and we'll check that out to see how that market is going when we have Organic Valley come forward. Are there any other questions for Nicole? If not, thanks a lot for your time, Nicole, and stay tuned in. If you have burning news that we need, please contact us and or we'll contact you. So
That's great.
thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
Our next guest is Travis Forgos. Ford.
Would you like me to sit there?
Sure, come on right up front. Welcome to our proceedings. And you could tell us.
Who I am and what I'm doing. Are you all good there with just, yeah, okay. So Senator Starr, actually, I'm from Vermont originally. You and I have a history of having these meetings since at least 1992.
Years
So we
later.
started the grazing program with Sarah and Doug Flack and
Up
you know,
north.
all of that work that we've been doing. So you and I go a long ways back, actually, and I cannot believe this 30 years later, we're still doing it, but here it is. My name is Travis Forbes. I'm the Executive Vice President of Membership for Organic Valley. So I represent everything for Organic Valley from first contact with farmers up to delivery to the first plant. My history, however, is much more Vermont centric or oriented. I was the first Organic Valley farmer to join the Organic Valley from Vermont and helped build the first 3 loads of milk. That was in 1999. Prior to that, I was part of a small Vermont labeled company called Organic Cow Vermont. So I was part of that group and then shifted over to Organic Valley once Organic Cow was sold and to a stock company. So I've been part of the co-op for 22 years. I was board director on that cooperative while I was a farmer. Almost 8 years ago, I moved to Wisconsin and took over this part of really our first step in succession, in my opinion, to make sure that the membership and the simple mission and vision that we were created on stayed alive and vibrant. So thought, you know, to be honest with you, I did not come presented or really prepared with a lot of a presentation because quite frankly, I didn't get told what I was supposed to talk about. So that means you're stuck with me babbling and you guys will have to ask questions. But I want to give you guys a little bit of where we stand today in Vermont, because I do have those numbers. Nicole brought up, and I don't know if Nicole is still here, how many farms are in Vermont. 96 as of last week of the Vermont dairy farmers that are organic are part of crop cooperative.
Oh.
And if you hear me say crop cooperative in Organic Valley, same thing. You know, we have farms across the state. In our second loads of milk really focused on the Northeast Kingdom, and a lot of you all know Jack Laser was a very prominent player in
You
Vermont.
haven't got room for 28 more?
Well, we'll get to the conversation because I am here for a reason, and I think that we have to have a conversation about. I don't want to say misinformation, but maybe more effort. And I don't want to talk about, I will talk about the Vermont 28 farmers, but I'd rather talk about the 98 farmers, plus the 20 that are being dropped by Maple Hill in the region, because we can't afford to lose farms in Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, or Northern New York. We're all interceded here. We don't want to lose any of that. So 96 average farm size for our whole cooperative across, the 34 states and 1,700 farms. Of those farms, 1,400 to 1,500, depending on what day we're talking about, our dairy, we are 76 cows on average. Our average age of our farmers is 46. So we're about a pure decade younger than the average. Last year's organic premium over conventional was $13 a hundredweight. We average 183 days on pasture, and that's work that we're very proud of, and we are going to be carbon neutral by 2050. Naturally, where we are ahead of the game, we're very proud of the work. We have carbon heroes and what we call our farmers, the amount of grazing they're doing. We're working very diligently. We're not going to buy credits. We're not going to do all those kind of pieces, but our farmers are going to lead the way. And we feel that we're going to be the gold star when it comes to carbon sequestration and our cooperative being carbon neutral by 2050 naturally. The market, in 2015, we were living I don't want to say a dream, but a gold rush for the organic industry, and that was national. And the growth really was, in my opinion, the beginning of Costco and all these large chains, not just giving lip service to organic agriculture, but actually saying, we're in it and we're in it for real. And if you guys look at the numbers, if you don't have the numbers, I encourage you to get the numbers of what these retailers really bring to the table. If we like them or not is irrelevant. They buy a ton of organic products, and they are really committed to that. Now, are they committed to fair pay prices for farmers, stable pricing, all that's a different conversation, but they're real. So when they got involved, and we were seeing also a very low conventional price. So you saw at that point, we were at $20 spreads between conventional and organic. It did catch the attention of large dairies across the country. And so from 2013 to 2015 to the end of 2015, we saw growth happening that we hadn't really experienced at all in the past. And so we brought on a lot of farms. We were seeing an attrition rate, natural attrition rate for us is around 3.7%. That's volume, not farmers, but on a volume basis, we naturally see between 3 and 4, 3.7 over the last 10 years. We were seeing attrition rates up close to 10% during that time because there was so much competition. And there's a time for price and there's a time for supply, and that people weren't worried about price at the time. Well, that brought a lot of interest, a lot of big players into the game, and all of a sudden the marketplace slowed. And we had committed to over 400 farms across the country for up to 3 years. So a lot of people dropped farms. We didn't. And we had to go down on price. We had to, institute supply management. But we have been slogging through an oversupply for the last 4 years. We also lost money as a cooperative for 4 years because while we did come down on price from the highest peaks, we made some decisions. The board of directors made decisions that we were going to hold, and in doing so, we lost money as a business for 4 years. We've been in a recovery mode. The COVID phenomenon for us, like Leon, of course, mentioned, did give us a huge spike right at spring flush last year, which really helped. And the shift from, eating in restaurants and food services where we weren't strong shifted us into categories where we were strong. And so we were able to suck up a lot of milk. We had budgeted a $3 million profit goal. Remember, we're a $1.2 billion business. We were hoping to hold our pay price and make $3 million. We actually were able to hit 2%, did a 13th check. And that really, which is, by the way, about $20 million that we made in 2020. We really did something that was based not on artificial demand, but on something in a crisis that none of us can understand or experience. And we are seeing that change now. So COVID starts to wane. People have been sick of being at home. So they go out and they start eating at restaurants again, and then demand drops back down. So we've seen that within our organization. We are, as an organization, close to balanced. But we still have problems out there in making sure that we're actually getting a fair price for the supply, because that's the other problem. While we are hearing and talking about more people trying organics or more demand out there, I would argue that the price that we're able to get in the marketplace is nowhere near where we would hope to be able to do it, so we could raise price to farmers. And so we're making decisions that cut back on any of the profitability that we actually have to play in the marketplace, because large dairies with efficiencies do have an advantage there. So we are dealing with that across the board with our cooperative. As for, we just had our annual meeting 3 weeks ago in Wisconsin. Normally we have them in April, but we actually had it in person. And we had farmers across, and Leon mentioned we do have a pretty robust supply management program within our cooperative. The piece of growth then has to be done through appeals, which we go through with a farmer committee, and then really look at maximizing and optimizing routes and those kind of pieces. We just are moving forward with 44 million pounds of milk of granted appeals across the country. All of that milk is from the Midwest across the East, and all of the appeals in New England should be covered up through the 2020 year. So if they put in appeals in the last few months, that's probably not going to get covered here, but we are feeling pretty good about what we're able to do to bring on the milk that we have in the region. Is it risky? Yeah. We've decided we're going to hold our base supply the same and still feel like we've got a supply demand imbalance. That's not where we want it to be, but we've got to do what we need to do with our farmers. We also have started a reserve pool. There's 2 farmers in the state of Vermont, one of which I'm going to see tomorrow. Sorry, in an hour. Seth and another, and I don't know the individuals, but we have signed them on a pool. They were dropped by a company in Connecticut and without a market. And we are taking on those 2 farmers and working together with Stonyfield just because they are very diligently thinking about how to help farmers as well. We're going to ship that milk in Stonyfield, and so we'll make it work. We don't usually do these things, specifically when taking on reserve pools without a market. We have done reserve pools across the country over the years when there is a market. This one here is a little bit bigger of a jump, but we're going to do it because it's the right thing to do, and we're going to do everything we can to find markets for those. That brings us to where we are today. As you guys have already heard, so I'm not going to go too deep into any of this. There's a lot of people with a lot of risk. And really looking at where the marketplace needs to be for them by the end of July or the end of August, depending on who you talk to. More pressing, of course, is this Maple Hill drop. There's 20 or 22 farmers that are looking for homes, a lot of grass milk there. And what we're starting to see, so you have those, so you have the ones that were dropped by Horizon. And by the way, I have not talked to Horizon, but if I was Horizon, my belief, and I think that as you've talked about it, and I'm sure you could talk about it more, they're looking for efficiencies. They're shipping milk well over 300, 400 miles to get to these plants. And so basic business would say it doesn't make any sense. And that's that. And, so I'm not going to sit here and say that companies shouldn't be looking at efficiencies, because they have to. It doesn't change the terrible situation that puts the state of Vermont or the state of the upstate New York or in Maine. And if your business is to make money, then it would make rational sense that you would say that you don't want to ship milk more than 250 miles from the plant. That makes sense. Crop's never done that. That's not how we're built. I think that what we are really staring at is something that we don't believe is just going to be this moment in time. I think it's the tip of the iceberg. The consolidation, the maturation of the organic industry is something I think that we are very scared about as we speak. Stable pricing, small family farms, how do we keep them going? I don't think a lot of people are going to, on a large scale, be interested in that as much anymore. I think that organic value will. I'm here to tell you that we're committed to Vermont. We're not going anywhere. The real question that we're going to start running into now as we move forward, the Horizon farmers getting dropped, Maple Hill farmers are being left, pay prices are being cut across other companies within this region, and everything's going to get harder. How do we find ways to continue to grow the marketplace so that we have homes for Northeast farmers. Quite frankly, I think that it's a real opportunity of growth, and this is no different, Senator Starr, than when we were talking in 1992. And in 1992, we had no organic farms, at least part of Organic Valley, that were here. And look at what we have. So the concept of finding ways to market these products can be done. But are there ways that the state can help or the federal people can help? And I would argue that there is. You know, we're having a terrible time on a supply chain level with hauling. Hauling is the number one problem we have. Milk truck drivers picking up this milk, having the trucks, having drivers for these trucks is causing a huge backlog. That's not just a Northeast issue, it's a national issue. But if I was going to say, what could you all do to help processors, trucking and hauling and those kind of pieces are right up there. Do we need more processing? I think processing is always one of those things that you want to look at for opportunities. And I think that those things are, you know, I would tell you that we're looking at what we could utilize to make things better. But you know, there are processing facilities out there and running. We work in Hood, we sell milk to Stonyfield. There are other plants. There's ways to make that work. But again, I think finding those routes and helping us with trucks would be a huge opportunity. The other thing is, like I told you all, Organic Valley's never really taken on farmers without a market or some kind of commitment. A company like us is taking that chance. That's for the, you know, the weight and the risk drops on the other 1,700 farmers. It drops on the Leon and Abby's of the world, right? And, you know, I think it'd be wonderful to have a conversation about with all these federal dollars that are out there, or state dollars, how can we take some chances together with this utilization if we're taking on milk to find a home for them? How do we come up with a program that maybe helps us cover utilization on some of the 100 weights on a pricing mechanism so we can keep these people whole without, you know, Organic Valley taking all the risk? Or anyone, quite frankly, I think would be interested in that kind of piece. So I think that's important. There is no question that Organic Valley has slowed down in taking on supply over the last 4 years. I just told you why. I will tell you my disappointment personally, and candid, guys, you know, I'm just a candid person. I'm a candid Vermonter. I brought with me to Wisconsin. I'm disappointed that, you know, Vermont didn't reach out to Organic Valley at an executive level and ask us what we could do to make this work. Because what you should all hear right now is myself, the CEO of the cooperative, we're all sitting around saying, how can we drive this forward? What can we do? And there's a lot of energy and a lot of time being spent right now. Of course, I'm out here doing this today, and I'm out here to meet with our farmers. I would have loved a phone call, because I think that instead of it being the doors are entirely shut and we're not willing to do anything, if people came to us and said, hey, you guys are really, you do 96 of the farms in Vermont are part of you, how can we work together to save the other 27, or as I like to say, the 120 that are going to be left in the region? I think that it would have been a wonderful start. That all being said, I'm here now. I did have a couple of people reach out to me, and so I found my way to get back to help people. And we're going to go there. But yes, we have had our doors shut. That doesn't mean that we don't want to help, and we are committed to making a movement here. Now, I think Stonyfield will talk to that if Rolf is on the phone. I think there's other opportunities we have with some of these retailers to really make a difference. But I would encourage you all to never stop, because you hear one piece that says we're not doing something. And I don't mean Organic Valley. In my experiences, I wouldn't have gotten on that organic cow truck without calling Peter Flint 30 days in a row to get him to come up to Northern Vermont and tell me that he wasn't going to take on farms in Northern Vermont. And look at how many farms are in Northern Vermont today. Persistence, commitment, crop is committed. And I want to make sure that's very clear to the Northeast, is committed to the farms that we have across the country. And we'd love to find a way to make this work. How we can do this in a way that's positive and productive without risking all of our farmers to go backwards and lose money again this coming year is the work we can all do together. But looking forward to finding an answer to how to make this get done. I can't guarantee we're going to take these farms. Can't. I can guarantee that we're going to do everything we can to take these farms if they want to come with crop, and we can find help to get there. Yep. So that's my battle. What questions can I answer for you all? If any.
It's a never-ending battle. You got a job as long as you live.
Yeah, and you do too, it would appear. I wish that we weren't meeting under these circumstances, frankly.
Travis, so no one from the task force has talked with you folks?
So I am on the task force now,
Okay,
and that's great. And I'm meeting with Secretary
Kevin?
Tebbets and with Diane Loftel. We're on our path. But I've read a lot of articles and it's just a little disappointing that somehow, Organic Valley's at least reputation hasn't at least had some, did somebody call the guy from Vermont that used to live here in Vermont that helped run the movement to see how he could help us? Sarah Flack did, and that's how I got connected to him.
Oh,
But I would just say Organic Valley is much more committed and wants to be, the piece to go to if we're having questions to help you.
and where, you mentioned Maple Hill Farms?
Maple Hill is another, I don't know, Ed, do you want to call them a cooperative or do we company in a cooperative?
They're a company because they've got a lot of corporate money behind them.
Yeah, so they're in New York. And
Okay.
so those farmers are, I believe, at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So they're another group that we're trying to look at to say, okay, how can we do this? And balance, taking on the supply. Well, folks like Leon have been waiting under supply management for 4 years to get their appeals. So how do you balance all those things is what we're doing right now.
Dan, did you have a question?
John's got a question.
John? O'Brien?
Yep, thanks, Bobby. Travis, just a couple quick questions, since you definitely think in a macro way, where your position. Why is it that restaurants do not seem to use organics the same way, families do at home? And then also how Organic Valley feels about the challenges from plant-based beverages, or as the media and others say, plant-based milks. I just wondered how somebody in the dairy industry feels about those inroads.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying beverages, because if you use the word, milk with our farmers, they'll lose it there. It's alternative beverages are a tremendous challenge. And, just like water, bottled water is a tremendous challenge when you're talking about what's out there. I think that we have to be really clear about the positives that milk and organic milk can bring to the table. And I've been trained for a long time to focus on the positives and not the negatives. So I'm trying not to pit our folks against anyone in the alternative beverage business, but there's no question that it has had challenges for us and it's taken market share. So how do we innovate? How do we grow is a challenge, not just for Organic Valley, but I think it's for everyone, because and I think the dairy industry has been fighting it forever of how to make those inroads. I don't know if it's going to stop, Representative O'Brien. I think it's going to get faster and more interesting, because it used to be soy, right? Then it went to, and that was there for quite a while. Then it went to almond. That was there for less time. Then you go to cashew, then you go to oat. What's next? What's next? What's next? And I think that the consumers we have today are so fast in what they're changing, their evolution of what they want. You can't keep up with it. And I also, all of these competitors and most of everyone that's left, in the organic space comes with dollars that we don't, we can't even fathom. Are any of those products out there, be it alternative beverages that are organic or even other competitors in the dairy industry, having to make any money? How much are they paying so that they sometime can sell their brand in the future? There's a ton of that going on, and we're combating that as well, because we're the largest cooperative that's independently owned, that's organic in the country. And I would dare say, I believe the world, at least in organic dairy. We're fighting that every day, because everything we do is real, true blue. These alternative beverages are being, specifically the alternative beverages are being pushed by either stock money or EBITDA drives so that they can sell and then make dollars on top of it. So it's not real. And I think that that's the problem there. As for restaurants, I think that there's, I'll speak from Organic Valley, because I know other companies have done better. with industrial and restaurants. I think there's huge potential to get into those marketplaces. It hasn't been easy, and I think that there's a low cost option that those folks are really looking at on a price basis. When you go into a hospital or a school and those kind of costs, it's hard if they're trying to figure out the budgets to have to pay a little bit more for an organic option. It hasn't been a place that we have been very successful in. I don't think it's because there's a lack of demand. I just think it's the lack of the cost or the price to make it work in the marketplace today. We continue to put a lot of energy into that, specifically international, looking at how we can move forward there. And we would love to continue to find restaurants and industries to work with, but it has not been our strong suit. It's an opportunity, yes.
Travis, do you do other milk besides fluid? Do you manufacture organic in the products?
Yeah, we have over 1,000 SKUs from all of dairy. So there's no way to manage just fluid milk. So we have cheese, butter, powder. I shouldn't say there's not other ways to manage. You can't manage by taking all the milk from every farmer that you have and being responsible for that without having management of a supply chain. So we run all of those pieces. And that's how we kind of balance through the year.
Yeah. Yeah, other questions for Travis, Dan?
Travis, I have kind of two sets of questions. The first, follow up on your comments about hauling. Thinking about it a little bit, there are two task force really. There's more than two dealing. The governor's got a task force on the future of agriculture. The secretary's got a task force on the immediate problem with the horizon dropping producers. This task force is kind of the bigger picture, concentrated on dairy. So the organic piece is the organic segment of the marketplace fits within the larger market structure of the Vermont dairy industry, and we're trying to put those all of those pieces together. And so our focus is more on the longer term than the shorter term problem with Horizon. So your comment about hauling fits within that. We're looking for proposals and thoughts about how to improve the stability of the dairy industry as a whole, and hauling comes up across conventional and organic. So you kind of broad brush spoke of routes and trucks. Abby spoke about drivers. So I'm just wondering if you could fill out what you see as the problem and a little more detail about what might be a possible solution that the task force could push through the state.
Yeah, that's great question. What we're running into now, and of course, COVID is driving us, right, in the supply chain and getting enough drivers and those kind of pieces. And it's probably a little bit worse for the organic side of the side than the conventional side, just because of the size of our farms. So when a driver's driving in the northern tier, some of those pickups that I heard of the farmers that were dropped, specifically like 27 on a route, right? So if you have that kind of driving going on, you've got people that are pretty drawn out. And we've had in the last month, multiple drivers or trucks, our contracted haulers just say we're done at the end of the week. We don't have drivers. We don't want to deal with this anymore. It's just a pain, and the supply chain is walking away from us. So to me, I think you're totally right that this is not going to be just an organic issue. I think this is an issue for anyone that's trying to move fluid around the state and just the realities of what's going on there. I strongly encourage a driver mentorship program or development program within the state that lets hauler companies know and give them opportunities to hire, to come and get drivers. I think driver loss is a big deal. And then ultimately, and I don't have an answer for you how to do it, but for us, we were thinking about it like, okay, we're losing all these drivers. Boy, it'd be great if there was is there a way to get drivers? And then haulers though, why not have a state or a federal piece of saying we have a fleet of trucks that can move milk around the state? Why not have a fleet of trucks that's owned by the state of Vermont or through the federal dollars that Biden's putting out an infrastructure that says we'll have someone maintain a fleet that we can get you the hauling at a fair price. I know you're smiling underneath that mask because I know it's crazy, but you said give up any ideas.
Yeah.
And the reality is, we're based in Wisconsin and we're contract hauling, connecting to drivers that are here. And they're starting to walk away from us.
So, but do you think the driving problem is the lack of drivers? So the companies have trucks and they have infrastructure, but they're lacking drivers at this point?
I think it's both. I think people are getting sick of even dealing with the infrastructure. And they're cutting back to just do the routes that make the most sense because the pressure of drivers, which I think has been there since I was milking cows as a kid, is not getting any better. And then if you think milking cows is tough, try driving around 19 hours a day on a truck when there's other options for people that have a lifestyle right now.
Okay,
And
so I would say what I got out of this is that we need to devote some more time than we have to the hauling issue, and thank you for aiming us. So it sort of follow up and associated, can you just give us a little bit a better understanding of how Organic Valley's milk moves from the farm? We've heard from two farms that Stonyfield is one location, and Booth Brothers is putting up milk as well. Could you just give us a little bit of a description?
Yeah, well, so
some sense of volume, and I'm not looking for what doesn't belong to us, but just a picture.
Yeah, no. So, we have 96 farms that are in the state. And of course, we can commingle with a couple of the New Hampshire farms, and we can commingle with some of the Eastern New York farms, depending on what the routes are going. But the vast majority of the milk is, especially our southern routes, are going to go into Stonyfield, right? And that's in a bulk. So we drive up with a full tanker, it goes into bulk, and then that's where we go from there. We do ship milk into the Hood plant at Booth Brothers, and they process it into HTSD, and then that moves into the Northeast for half gallons, half and half, all in HTSD form from there.
Is it primarily the half-gallon containers, and it's organic whole two? We do 4 whites, which is our strength, and then creamers. Either and. Well, not all creamers, I should say creamer in whatever variety they're doing at the Booth Brothers plant. Okay. Now, we can also go down, and we have plants in New York where if we want to go into UHT processing, where we have that kind of draw, we can do that as well. And then in the really off case, that we're out of, remember, we're trying to figure out routes for the whole country all the time. I would bet there's once a year where you may see milk from Vermont go all the way down into New York City. Or Morningstar, or I think it's Morningstar is the name, or Mountainside, one of them right outside New York City, that we could be doing processing in there as well. So is Stonyfield putting up milk for you as Organic Valley, or you're sourcing the Stonyfield fluid and yogurt products? So we sell bulk milk to Stonyfield for their products. Yeah. We have an agreement where we represent the Stonyfield brand with our milk. So they don't source that for us. We actually source that and work through them. In a different type of relationship. We're branded for fluid milk. For fluid. But not their yogurt is their own. We sell milk to them. Yeah. That's nothing that we're doing there. So they're putting up Organic Valley labeled milk in that plant as well as Stonyfield? So the Stonyfield plant is a yogurt plant. Yeah. They have a Stonyfield branded for half gallons of milk. Yeah. That is not done in that plant. That, and I can't tell you exactly where it is, but that's with Organic Valley. We source that milk through Organic Valley as well. So you can't tell me because you don't know, or you can't? I can't tell you because I don't know. Yeah. I would tell you it's in the East somewhere. Okay, so Stonyfield is using your milk to put up their brand somewhere other than at the Stonyfield. And they have their own source that I'm sure Rolf will talk about if he's on the phone. Okay, very. Unfortunately, he's not, so that's why I'm. Sorry, I didn't know. He said he was a grandfather this week, so I think he's up in Montreal. Okay. They have their own group of farmers. One of them was on the phone earlier. That's part of the Stonyfield Direct Group. Right. I think they represent like 50 million pounds of milk in the region, and then we represent significantly more that goes into there as well. So, and I'll quit in a second, Bobby, but your milk goes to the Stonyfield plant and then goes somewhere else to be packaged into the Stonyfield label? No, so. I'm sorry to be. That's okay. So, and I'm sorry if I'm not being clear.
Stonyfield buys milk from us. When they're dealing with us, they buy milk, we bring in a tanker, it
Yeah.
goes in there and they do their yogurt products.
Got it.
We have a license agreement where we work with them on their fluid half gallons of milk.
Okay, so it's,
And that could be, and I'm not saying, I don't know, I could get you the information.
so it's not going to Stonyfield, it's going wherever that
It would
is.
go to where we're looking at.
So that's really a third location for the milk coming out. of-
Or it could be good, that's why, but I don't know.
Oh,
Like, it
okay.
could be a Food Brothers that goes
Okay.
in the cartons or
Okay.
in New York. So
Okay.
that's why I'm not telling you that, because
No, I
I get you the information. I just
That'd be
don't know.
great. Can I impose on you to do
Sure,
that? Because
absolutely.
same thing, we're trying to paint the picture. So that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely, no problem.
So,
Got it.
John,
Travis, I'm just curious, of your 96 farmers, how many are the grass-fed farmers?
Great question, and I won't know exact off of there. I would say close to 20 or a little bit over that, right around there. It is a growth engine. for
That's
sure.
what I was gonna ask, is it, because they don't have a quota, right?
No, we actually, in the newest program in 2021, they are actually part of it because it's not necessarily about wanting to hold back production, but really understanding where supply is and how much is happening on the farms. It's important for everyone to be involved in that because anytime that we don't have that understood, then we have our own problems. So they actually joined the supply management program, so we know where their milk is at. Now, when it comes to triggering supply, grass milk right now is one of those areas where we're being pretty lenient in trying to bring it on. So I don't think anywhere in the country right now, there are, but maybe one or two farmers that we're not giving their full appeals to. And that could be because it doesn't fit on the truck, right? Like that kind of stuff. But for the most part, we're asking grass milk farmers what they want to do on their farms and let them grow. Then ultimately, we just see it as such an opportunity, not necessarily a profitability opportunity. I'm not going to say that, but I think it's an opportunity that the marketplace is demanding, and there's really a place for that to grow.
And is that segregated and being put up by Booth, or is that going somewhere else to be put up as grass fed under your label?
It is being, I'm going to defer to say that'll be the second thing I get you, so I don't even say anything, but I would say we have different means. It's a different, because it will have to be segregated in its own way too.
Yeah,
Let me find out where.
okay, because that's a pretty good sized chunk, 20, I mean, it's 20, almost 20, it's more than 20% of the farms. isn't
Of
it?
the farms, but
Yeah.
not the supply.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But still, a pretty good chunk.
Oh, yeah, and it's one of those areas where we can grow.
Yes.
It is a growth engine.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Travis, I was wondering, you travel a lot in different states,
I do.
and do you see the organic certification rules being used differently from some states to say compared to Vermont?
I think that would be a fair assessment. I think that there is, now, of course, I'm a little partial to Nicole's NOFA because my family's still certified by NOFA, right? I think that there's no question that we need to continue to make sure that rules are held tight. I would tell you that I have a pasture committee that Leon, of course, actually heads in our cooperative because we double verify pasture standards even for our own farms because of the different states that we're dealing with and if that works or doesn't work for making sure that there's a certification process that we feel good about. So we actually are double checking on all those certs as well. I think that there are, and I'm gonna leave this fireworks for Ed. There's no question that we all want to see I meant that in a positive way, so I mean, that we have to close the loophole on these forever transitioning farms. I don't think we need to, I'm a big proponent that we have to give farmers a chance to one-time transition. I want to make that really clear. I think that the future, a lot of us, all of us, I was a conventional dairyman, had a chance to come over one time. But this loopholing stuff that's driving more and more cows is something that should not be allowed. We don't allow it in our cooperative. So I think that's really important. And then the pasture rule is no joke. I think what you're going to find though is some of these large dairies will hit the minimums. Not 1 ounce more than the minimums, but they're going to hit the minimums. And then the question really has to be about is what is the spirit of 30% dry matter on pasture? What do we need to do to maybe make that more rigorous and make sure that it does have what the consumer thinks it is, which is actually cows enjoying outdoor access and being outside. Because hitting 30%, and John, you were a big grazer in your day, you still are. 30% is not exactly rocket science, right? That's pretty, it can be done pretty easily. And I think that the bigger farms may have a challenge, but it can be done. So what does it really mean to have a strong pasture standard that the consumer really wants? Is something I would hope that we're all aligned in trying to drive forward.
Thank you, Judge. Want to introduce Senator Brock from Franklin County. He was at a different meeting and just made it in. He's part of
Good
the.
for you, you just need to.
Thank you.
You got out of it.
Well, there is something that we sometimes find ourselves having to be in two places at once, and I haven't quite mastered it yet.
Any other questions for Travis? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
for-
I'll get you that information.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Josh.
Good seeing you again.
Yeah, let's try to do it in a different circumstance.
Golly. Well, keep an eye out for 28. So we have, are you here to testify, sir?
Yes.
That's it.
And
So we're,
Thank you.
so Ralph is not coming
no,
and Dennis is not coming either. So we're up to here.
Right on time.
We're back
By
on
attrition
time.
because half of our witnesses aren't here. So here we are.
Yep, very good. Well, good morning, good afternoon, Ed. And you're with the Northeast Organic Dairy Producers Association.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, and did you receive questions?
I did receive some questions.
Yeah, and
So Tom Berry you thought he needed to leave, so Tom's not there. Tom? Oh, Tom.
he hasn't got on yet, but
He had to leave right at quarter up, so. Didn't you say-
Well-
Okay.
Mike, did you hear from Tom there?
Just did right now through Heather Darby. We're having some trouble with people emailing Linda and not getting it forwarded to me, so I'm gonna send him the information right now.
Okay. So Ed,
Yeah, we may have to,
You want to swap me out and
you can stay right there, but, and
we may have to hear from Tom if we can get him.
no problem.
Because he has another meeting at 1:00, but it's gonna take him a few minutes to get there. And,
So I just sent him the Zoom link, him and Heather Darby. He was trying to email Linda and he wasn't getting any response because she's out of contact. But
so you don't know if he's,
I just sent it to him. I will give him a few minutes and see if he joins on. I'll be able to put him right here in Zoom.
well, we may
It
have
looks like
to,
he wants to be here because he's saying he's scheduled to join the task force, but despite several emails, he hasn't gotten the Zoom link. So. Now it's 12:26 PM, so 5 minutes. ago.
so should we wait a few minutes?
I would, yeah.
you come up this morning or?
Yeah, nice.
Appreciate it. Yeah,
Beautiful drive.
yeah.
I've got out of the habit of driving to meetings.
I know, it's the whole new,
It's all been in a little box somewhere, so I need to get back into the habit of talking directly to people rather than.
this is our second open meeting. And it still feels a little awkward. Yeah.
Well-
But it's great to be able to.
But, and this is another issue, so.
Well, we appreciate your indulgence.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan and Senator Starr, while we're waiting, I do think it's a good idea that we try to get some haulers in here, or folks within the co-ops that deal with this issue, because this is, I've got that highlighted throughout this whole day and the last time when we talked to the conventional folks. So I think that we're seeing that that's an issue, as well as maybe folks from the Thomas plant and the Grafton plant, to see if we can figure out how that could intersect with what we're trying to do. So if we could, if we're looking at topics for the next meeting, I think those two would probably be good ones on my list.
Duly noted. Thank you. And already marked down, to be honest, but yes, in agreement.
You did.
Yeah.
I put in my 2 cents.
No,
Thanks.
appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah.
But you know as well as us, I don't know of one business that isn't looking for more help, whether you're a retail store or a contractor, building buildings, a processing plant trying to make cheese like we heard from Cabot. And I think, if we can get the unemployment people that are drawing off from that and back to work, a lot of these jobs will eventually get filled, but you can't pay people more to stay home than
True.
what they can earn. And
But I do think that we have the opportunity, while we're looking at some of the revisiting of VTC and UVM and some of the other schools, there's so much pressure on these students today to do college as opposed to do trades. And that's one thing we've gotten away from. And I think that that might be something that we could look at too in the long run, not just for the dairy industry, for everybody, but we're particularly looking at hauling issues. And if you had a flood of drivers with CDLs and trucks, or however they had the trucks, they can make a pretty good living off of that. If somebody supported them through the process. I know it's a lot, I believe it's a lot of money for CDL training. And that might be something that we want to look at to try to assist these folks. But I think what we're hearing is we need more labor in the trades, as opposed to some of the college courses that people are just right now we seem to be pushing into. So that would be something that it might be something to think about.
yeah, that's for sure.
What do you think?
Any luck?
No, looks like he kind of, the last email was, I tried and.
Well, he was looking for it ASAP at 12:26.
Yeah, 'cause
So I
he-
sent it at 12:31.
Yeah.
And he said he's scheduled to join by 12:45, so
Go ahead with Ed and.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
he comes in, I'll let you know.
So you can bring him in.
Yeah, as soon as he tries to join, I will bring him right up.
Yeah.
And you'll see him up on the screens.
Well, very good. Sorry to hold you up even 5 or 10 minutes, but why don't we get started, Ed, and go from there?
Okay. NODPA has been in business as a 501c5 advocacy group for organic dairy farms in the Northeast since 2001. Coincidentally, it was formed when Horizon tried to lower the price on producers way back then. That's when Horizon was under completely different management. So they've been through a few iterations of ownership and lots of money floating around. We don't process milk. We don't market milk. We don't do anything that we feel that can impact our ability to represent farms and farm families when it comes down to pay price, integrity of the National Organic Program, and whatever, by promoting the interests of organic and the role that organic dairy farm families play in that production. You'll notice that most organic cartons have pictures of nice old, there he is.
Are you there, Tom?
Just joining.
Oh, well, good to see you, Tom. Kind of hard to join without the Zoom numbers, right?
Here I am. Figured it out.
Welcome, and we want to give you as much time as you can take. We realize you have another engagement, so we'll get you started right away. Did you have some information for us in regards to dealing with the organic issues that are facing us here in Vermont, as well as, I guess, some of the rules and regs that you need to deal with in Washington, as in regards to different states using different standards to qualify their farmers as organic farmers?
Yeah, I do have some, sort of a list of questions that were sent to me, but I can, I'm happy to dive right in on the issue of rules and regs, if that's what you would like to start with. I can comment on that. And, where we are is with, I'm sure there's been a lot of talk about the announcement by Horizon that they're focusing away from Vermont and looking at larger farms, and that's really probably to some extent an outcome of the rules and regs you're talking about. The two key rules that have been a focus recently for Senator Leahy have been the origin of livestock rule, which there's a loophole there that large farms have, to his mind, abused in continuously cycling animals in and out of organic in a way that allows them to grow the milk supply quite quickly without having to have the animals, raised from birth as organic. It was, he believes, intended to present a single chance for a farm to do that, but not for farms to continuously cycle in and out of transition animals into organic using what is essentially a loophole. And the senator has been pushing the administration to fix this. They need to issue an origin of livestock rule. And that's been the case since well into the prior administration. The senator put language in the FY20 appropriations bill calling on this rule to have been finalized a year ago, and it still has not been. He raised it with Secretary Vilsack in a budget hearing and at his confirmation hearing this spring, and is hopeful of seeing a clarified origin of livestock rule sooner than later. And he does intend to communicate further with the secretary in short order, pushing for that rule to be finalized. It's past due, and it's needed to avoid a loophole that not only is resulting in larger and larger farms and too rapid a growth in the supply of organic milk, but also is eroding consumer confidence in organic dairy as it becomes evident that a lot of it's being produced on very large farms. That which will get us to another rule that is problematic, and that is rules related to access to pasture for organic animals. And it's clear that that's being loosely enforced at best on a number of large farms. The physical requirements of exposing hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of cows to pasture in the required basis kind of baffles any practical person as to what that looks like. And so the senator has pushed for stronger enforcement of the pasture rule as well. And the senator is working right now to lead a letter related to the Horizon announcement that would include a number of other delegation members from New England. And both of those issues are ones that he would like to include in that letter from the full Vermont delegation, as well as other members in New England. And he's working on drafting that letter right now.
Thank you, Tom. Your questions that we did send to you, do you have some answers on some of those?
Yeah, I'd be happy to go through those and dwell on the ones if there are, where there might be some questions. The first question was, what are the advantages of New England and Vermont in supporting organic milk production? And I think a number of the members of this committee are at least as familiar as I am with the fact that the Organic Farming Act really originated in Vermont. We've been doing organic a long time, and the small scale of a lot of Vermont dairies and the fact that we can grow some pretty good grass in the state makes it really ideal for organic dairy production at the type of scale that consumers expect and that really reflects to organic practices. So Vermont has some advantages, and this region as compared to areas where cows are raised in confinement operations and fed alfalfa from another state. So we've got advantages. And the second question is why is production moving west into bigger farms? And it references the regulatory conditions, but also talks about the market. And I think it's just fairly clearly, and Horizon has not been shy about talking about their exit as being having to do with economies of scale and being driven not so much by the market, but by the economic. I don't know that the market's changed a lot, but the economic reality of being able to produce milk more cheaply using a different set of practices in a different geography is really what we see driving it. The competition with larger farms in other areas.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom, do you have any sense on when the letter might move?
I would think very soon. We've got a draft that the senators worked on, and we've worked on at the staff level that we're working with the Vermont delegation to get it where they want, and then we'll move it to delegations in some other states. But I would guess within the next week or two we should be able to have something together. It'd take a little time to show it around to other offices and see who wants to sign on, give them some fingerprints. But it's very much in the mix right now.
And where exactly is the rulemaking on the organic standards? Have they issued any proposed, or they haven't even done that yet?
Yeah, no, what they've done several times in the last couple of years is pull it back for more public comment, but the public comment period's over, and we don't have, when the rule is issued, it'll probably be a final rule, since there has been a lot of public comment, but we have not seen what that might look like at this point.
So they're sitting on a final rule, and that's what
right
we're pushing. Okay,
and that's what we're pushing on, and hopefully we'll get sooner than later.
And is the pasture, where's that procedurally, the pasture rules? Yeah,
that's more a continual push to the USDA to do a better job enforcing that rule. That rule is final and in place, and as far as I know, not being considered to be changed, but it seems to be not strongly enforced, and there seems to be a diversity of how it is interpreted among organic certifiers across the country. So, whereas NOFA, which is the main certifier in Vermont, is quite detail oriented in looking at that rule and how it's enforced. There seem to be certifiers that are prepared to go out and take a much less strict look at how that rule is implemented. So the pressure there is for the USDA National Organic Program to do a better job across the board on enforcement of the standards that are in place. And Senator Leahy has increased the funding for the National Organic Program as chairman of the Appropriations Committee in the past couple of appropriations bills with very specific language that USDA needs to do a better job on enforcing organic standards. And we're hopeful of seeing that. And it's also an issue that he's raised with Secretary Vilsack when he's had the opportunity.
So is it a interpretation issue or just the federal apparatus needs to be more stringent in overseeing the various interpreters?
Yeah, I think the latter. Given the opportunity, there will probably always be some organic certifiers who are prepared to take a much more relaxed interpretation of the rules. So what we're looking for is stronger USDA oversight of what it is the certifiers are prepared to certify, and that's really the senator's instruction is to the USDA, not to those other certifiers. So it seems in this case, USDA needs to do a better job overseeing the organic certifiers and making sure that they're appropriately enforcing the rules.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Tom?
That's good.
Good.
Yep.
Any other questions? John O'Brien?
Thanks, Bobby. Tom, I just wondered, since this comes up pretty much every hearing of our task force, when's the next chance to convince the federal nutritionist that whole milk should be served in schools? I know, even in our House Ag, this has come up a lot, and we don't have a lot of power over that. But I know it's not a thing that happens every year, every other year, but they revisit this at a certain point, and I would think our Vermont delegation would be very interested on changing their thinking, because both science and I think public opinion now is that we need to make milk something that's consumed a lot in schools.
Yeah, the opportunity to impact that is the reauthorization of the Child Nutrition Act, which has been in play. It's in play now, and I'd have to double check with Polly Major, who does the nutrition portfolio. Might even be able to do that while I'm on the call, but that is something that needs to be done, and I believe it's I believe it's in play this Congress, probably not this year. It'd be next year.
So you guys haven't forgotten about that then, I take it that.
No.
No.
No, we're reminded of it frequently. I think, it's always on the short list of issues that are raised when we have dairy discussions in Vermont. It's always certainly top 3 or 4 issues whenever I talk to dairy advocates or farmers in Vermont.
Yeah. Other questions for Tom? If not, we know you have another meeting, Tom, and want to get you there on time. Thanks a lot for your time today, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you. And, at the risk of filibustering, and I do have a couple minutes, I want to mention one other thing that was on the questions, which is talking about market development around organic/regenerative. And I hear the term a lot, and I just want to say generally an area to keep an eye on, and one that Vermont can be at the cutting edge and where the committee may find the opportunity to be helpful is there's a lot of talk about and a very real desire and potentially a fair amount of money coming towards the question of how we can help farmers benefit from doing work that benefits the climate, carbon storage, and agricultural practices that release less carbon or potentially make their farms into carbon sinks. And so having a question come about organic dash regenerative, I think what we need to work on is really defining what regenerative agriculture looks like and how we begin to enumerate the carbon benefits of regenerative ag. And that will position us to use funds that may come from the reconciliation packages being worked on right now. And certainly we could work on the next farm bill, which is at this point coming up quickly around the corner, to have a definition for regenerative as we do now for organic. And that would enable the USDA and the federal government to then direct resources towards those practices. But I think we're in the throes now of defining what those practices look like. And there's a couple projects in Vermont that are keeping us out front in that conversation. So I'd just say generally, that's a good conversation to track, one that will benefit Vermont and will be needed before long if we get some real dollars in play around climate and agriculture and regenerative ag.
If you do have another minute, Tom, do you follow up? Do you see the money moving more towards incentives on altering practices, or money moving towards farms being used as sink for the carbon sequestration, or both?
Well, I think that's the question we have to answer: is how do we pursue agriculture in a way that produces food and also has the farms as carbon sinks? So I think there's two tracks there. One is one where we begin to pay farmers for those practices, and the reconciliation bill, the Build Back Better bill that's in play, we may not pass it, we may, but the Senate Agriculture Committee pushed out what they would like to see in that bill on Friday, and there is a lot of money there for practices that help farms do better on climate, and some funds that could potentially pay for carbon sequestration on the farm. So I think both is where the opportunities will be, and we have to work hard to make sure that the science keeps up with what we need in order to allocate dollars when we put them in place.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Tom, and
Thank you.
We'll stay in touch.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the work the committee is doing.
Thanks for hanging in there, Tom. Thank you.
So Ed, we're back.
Yeah, and I can bring some clarification to some of the questions you asked.
Great.
The origin of livestock was first put out as a proposed rule in 2008. It was withdrawn then in 2015. There was another proposed rule put out, and under that administration, it should have gone to a final rule in 2017. But when the administration changed, their priorities changed, and it was put out for extra comment. There was a time when it was thought that the proposed rule from 2015 could be made into a final rule, but then there was some threat of legal challenge, and the USDA are very wary of situations like that, where they come to a final rule that goes to the OMB, Office of Management and Budget. And so USDA withdrew that, put it out for further comment. We went through that comment process, and it's now awaiting the publication of a final rule, which it hasn't gone to the Office of Management and Budget, and it hasn't gone to the different agencies within the USDA, which is all part of that process. So the likelihood of getting it to come in without a lot of extra pressure by the end of this year is very slight. That's where a lot of pressure can be exerted to push it through the USDA, push it through the Office of Management and Budget, which is an executive office, and out as a final rule is immediately implemented. And one of the issues with that rule, I think everybody's covered the fact that you do have continuous transition in some cases, and you do have rearing of calves conventionally, not organic, which I think this rule will cover and end by having some explicit language that will stand up to legal challenge. And that is the problem with a lot of the regulations. They've got to stand up to the legal challenge. One area which we've been pushing, which hasn't got a lot of support from processors, is that once you transition from conventional, everybody's agreed that should be a one-time event. We're saying that this should be a one-time event for an existing dairy herd. There's some discussion whether that can just be 60 heifers or 100 heifers put together and then transition. So those issues, I think, will be solved by this rule, but we're also highlighting as much as we possibly can and could benefit from more highlighting from this committee or other groups, is that once those animals are transitioned, they cannot be sold as organic. So what is happening now is that these animals are transitioned in, say, 500 heifers are transitioned from conventional to organic. They are milked once, they're sold 500 cows to a large dairy. So effectively, that is continuing the continuous transition. What we're saying is that those animals that are transitioned with the one-time exemption cannot be sold, transferred, or traded as organic. That will close that loophole. It will mean that large dairies can't respond to increases in demand within a year. It will mean you have to go through the whole 3-year process. It will mean it'll be a level playing field across the country. So that loophole is something that we've been pushing, but you notice nobody else has mentioned, because the large processors, that includes Organic Valley, unfortunately, want to be able to have that ability to use for those transition cows to be moved to another dairy as organic. Currently, under the NOP regulations, any transition animal cannot be sold for organic beef. So with organic beef, it's got to be organic from the last third gestation. So those transition animals, when they're transitioned, are only transitioned to organic for milking. And we want to say on that particular operation.
And do you know how the final rule, as it's currently written, addresses that?
We only know from as far as the proposed rule did and the comments. And within the proposed rule, USDA contradicted themselves, which is not unusual, contradicted themselves in how they explained the situation. They highlighted this fact that there was abuse, as did the Inspector General and numerous other agencies previously. So hopefully, if we can get an origin of livestock rule in place by the end of this year that does curtail this, then it won't solve this immediate problem, but looking for the future, it'll give a greater degree of stability for those that are already in organic dairying. And we won't experience the glut we had in 2016, 17. On the regenerative, then
Can you do the pasture?
okay.
Yeah.
From the point of view of pasture, that was made into a regulation in 2010. USDA at the time did an extensive education of their certifiers. We are still in a situation where there is a difference in implementation between different certifiers. Some of it comes down to the length of the grazing season. And there are some certifiers within the regulation, there's a minimum of 120 days. Like that. But most grazing seasons, like in Vermont, is 180 or something. So if you're living in an area that has a grazing season of 180 days, you're expected to graze those 180. If you're irrigating arid desert, then you're probably only going to do it for 120 days. And so that's where these large dairies in Texas and Colorado are able to meet the legal definition of what they're doing. And what is an added problem is that the certifiers do not have the qualified inspectors to go through the books of a 10,000 cow dairy, which has its own veterinarian staff, its own ration, which is totally computerized. And you really have to understand what we've been proposing is the inspectors are veterinary trained or have a long history in understanding rations so that you'll be able to get that 120 days, 30% dry matter. Now, as Travis said, they might just meet that. There's nothing in the regulation that says they have to do anything but meet that at a minimum. And the other issue that isn't detailed is where irrigated pasture comes in. Now, in the wording of the regulation, and I know because I helped write it, so it was very well defined. Pasture cannot be an annual crop. So you can't plow up a field, put in annual rye or annual grazing or annual sorghum or something, and they go to their graze, they get put back into something else. It's supposed to be part of a rotation. And again, this is where some of the larger dairies and arid areas are getting around that. Able to produce these large amounts of milk at a much lower cost than the dairies that are following it. So the fault is partly with the NOP and partly with certifiers. Excuse me. Partly with the certifiers, and what we would like to see again with certifiers is that there is some certification for their inspectors. So you have to reach a certain standard in understanding of the area you're inspecting in, which there isn't currently. We'd also like to see them paid better, because currently they're not paid that well. We'd like to see it become a profession that these people can make a living from, and not just do part-time as they do other stuff.
So were you serious about a 10,000 cow
Organic herd, yes.
organic herd?
Yes. Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Texas.
How many acres would it take to pasture 10,000 cows?
Well, if you irrigate, not that many. So if you look at the actual details, 120 days on irrigated pasture, then you don't need that many acres to do that. And then how they save costs in other areas is there's been a lot of fraudulent grains coming in from Europe and elsewhere, which did not meet the standards for the NOP in this country, and so they've been buying those cheaply on the market by the box truck load because they can. So that's where it comes down to. You go onto a farm in Vermont or New York, you look out and you can see pathways where the cows go out to grass. You can see the fences there. You can see the water drops. You can see the electric fencing.
Yeah.
You go. I haven't been to Texas, but I went to Colorado to the Aurora Dairy, which is a vertically integrated dairy of 5,000 cows in Colorado, another 5,000 in Texas, and you don't see those pathways.
How do they get there? Fly them in or?
No, there is a pathway, but they're not pasture. They're annual crops that are being seeded every year. So, and it's dry, so they say they turn them out at night because it's too hot during the day. So it's and from the point of view of who buys this milk, everybody buys this milk from. You know, I was interested to hear your question about trying to decipher where the milk came from
Yeah,
that went into a Stonyfield package
yeah,
supplied by Organic Valley.
yeah.
What Travis didn't say was that milk came from Vermont. It probably didn't. You can tell by looking at the numbers on the top of the carton where it comes from.
Yeah.
But I understand that most of the Stonyfield milk is ultra pasteurized. So it might have come from an area in New York, but it could equally well have come from anywhere. And that's, you know, there is in this whole question of the dairies that have risen have let go, then it took a lot of effort on my part to get an emailed statement 5 days after the rumor started from Dannon, giving the bare minimum details. And, you know, it was call this person. Well, we called, but somebody's got to pick up at the other end. So, you know, there is a deliberate, and it always has been, there is no transparency in how the milk is used, where it is shipped. And some of that is, you know, there is some proprietary information in there, but by going into the federal milk marketing order detail, you can find out what comes out of each plant and what goes into each processing plant. But then you need the federal milk marketing order to publish that. And federal milk marketing order 1 in the Northeast is the only one that publishes that. So, yeah, I think I've covered. How do you make it better?
Do you think the rule itself needs to be tightened? No, it's an enforcement and professionalization of the enforcement apparatus.
And the NOP have finally got to that point. You know, they now have 72 employees. Back in 2005, they had 8, I think.
Mhm.
So they're now in a position where they should be able to do that. And they do have a lot of money because everybody keeps on giving them more money. So it's a professionalization of a multi-million-dollar industry that is making people lots of money. Where there's money to be made, people are going to keep. So, you know, that we don't want to. When we helped write that regulation, it was done with a group of farmers across the country that wanted to make it very practical, that wouldn't burden any one particular farm, any one particular system, but also that could be legally enforced. Because what the problem was before that, all it was in the regulation was there had to be access to pasture, which to me and you means they go out to graze. But to some dairies, it means they had a barn door that was open.
Yeah.
So,
But you think the way the rule is written now, that it's clear enough that should, if it was properly enforced, that would be either restricted or prohibited?
yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And from a practical point of view, it's taken, you know, 10 years to get this relatively simple origin of livestock rule through. So, there is a lot of pressure from the processors and the Organic Trade Association on behalf of the processors to make the rules easier.
Yeah.
So, do you have any more questions on that?
John?
No, I think I'm good.
Very helpful.
Jackie,
Thank you.
John, you have any questions for Ed
Okay,
on?
On the rules, so I think now you're going to talk organic and regenerative? Yeah.
Yeah, organic and regenerative.
Yeah.
Yep.
The horse has left the barn. Dannon has its own regenerative standards, which are in the marketplace. And they're, the farm they're promoting has got 20,000 cows in freestall barns, which is going to be the basis of their regenerative supply. So, you know, from the point of view of coming up with regulations, any regulation is going to take at least 5 years to work its way through the system. So there has to be pressure from the federal government in some form. We still don't have a definition that milk should be from bovine, mammal, whatever mammals are.
Mammalian.
Thank you. And, as everybody said, that, the juices that are out there, which are just water and flavoring and sugar with no nutritional value, they're in the dairy case, and they've overtaken the dairy case, and they're cheaper and easier to make for processors because you just add water. You don't have to deal with 50 farmers who want a reasonable paycheck. So any company that's in business for profit and its shareholders would obviously move towards that route. Because Dana makes a big issue about their B Corp status as well, which again is no enforcement to that. And they project this picture of a company that cares for the environment. Their practices don't match up to that.
I missed, sorry, Ed, I missed, who has these 20,000 cows?
That is Dana. Well, not Dana doesn't own the cows, but the
Horizon, yeah, they're farmer or whatever, yeah, okay, sorry, yep. Okay.
Where is that farm?
in Ohio, 50 miles away from their processing plant.
Yeah, I heard
It
that.
fits the criteria.
20,000.
Just have small farms all along the highway. That's going to be closest to the easiest way to get into the processing plant.
And what is it going to be put up under a different label, or is it going to be white wave or?
Well, they won't be white wave, it won't be organic.
Yeah,
It'll just be regenerative.
regenerative. So it could be a new label then.
I would think so. I can't remember on my research, but I did quite a bit of research in the last couple of weeks on exactly trying to get down to the detail behind some of this stuff. Because their reason for dumping these farms is because it's too far to ship milk from Vermont to Buffalo.
Yep.
And it is. But in between that, you've got at least 5 processing plants that you can take the milk to. And we just put them in a carton with the Horizon name on, and it's Horizon milk. Well, so this is.
So that justification is that
Doesn't stand the test of reality. And in looking at trucking, then in Europe, that they have transfer stations where 10 farms are bring it to a central location, and then from there you'll go out to the processing plant. So these problems with trucking aren't, there are examples around the world where this has been solved. With organic, they still insist that each buyer's milk will go in a separate truck. So Horizon milk and Organic Valley organic milk will have to go in separate trucks. They're organic. So they all follow the same standards. They all have the same production practices. So instead of having 2 of them going around the same route, why not just have one going
same
farms in this area and all the farms in that?
same as in conventional.
Conventional.
Okay.
I do know in Great Britain they're having trouble with trucking right now. It's a universal problem.
It's a universal problem with, and trucking a milk truck in the middle of winter, going down icy roads, narrow roads, it's nobody, they don't get well paid. So.
Well, that's an interesting common sense,
Yeah.
tried and true solution to assembling loads. Yeah.
Is that that's a federal rule or?
No, the difference in putting them in separate trucks for different buyers is just what they do.
Company practice.
Yeah. As long as it's only organic milk in one truck, because then the handler has to be certified in organic. So, and there's certain conditions when you dump the milk out, you've got to wash the whole tank and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You can't mix organic and conventional.
Yeah. Can you give us where those plants are? Give us a picture of, the 5, you say there are 5 plants. So there's is it in Oneida, the plant up?
You've got Oneida, and you've got one in Syracuse.
Yep.
And then you've got a plant down in Connecticut, which is,
That's the old Gaida plant?
that's the old Gaida plant.
Yeah.
You've got an empty plant used to be Heroic, that is now empty, being turned into, finally got sold. So then you've got upstate in New York, which is below capacity. So there,
Is farmland, are they still putting up organic milk in the old farmland?
I'm not sure.
Why, Wawa owns it now.
Right, I'm not sure.
Okay,
But it's, we're talking about a multinational company like Danone that does have influence on where it puts its product. Not like we're talking about a small company in Vermont that nobody really wants to deal with. They want the processing for Danone. So you would think that if Danone asked some of these plants to do a bit of processing with them, they would be overjoyed at getting that sort of customer. There's the possibility of future processing.
okay.
John has his hand up.
John O'Brien? Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wondered, Ed might know this, and it came up earlier, I guess, with Travis and with all our questions about hauling, whether Ed knew of any countries where say the federal government or a state, a province, has its own trucking fleet. I could see Vermont having 5 tractor trailers at the Agency of Transportation or Commerce, and either subsidizing trucks or even owning a fleet. Like what we hear last time, that a couple big LFOs have their own trucks. So have you heard about that? Since hauling's a global problem, Ed, have states or provinces taken this approach to figuring out this problem?
Not to my knowledge, and I think that most countries wouldn't. From the point of view of subsidization of organic production, there are a lot of countries that do that. So if the cost of, at this point then, the producers, the farmers do pay some of the trucking costs. One guy I talked to the other night, then his trucking cost for the month is $900. So one question that I have back from some of these farmers is, if the cost is high, then come back to us and see how much we can pay for it, which Danone never did. So,
Yeah.
The processing companies aren't taking on a lot of this extra cost for trucking, they're passing some of that on. So, in Europe, then you get organic is subsidized, not subsidized, but they get payments for their production practices because they're good for the environment. They're a good addition to the whole global climate controls. And again, in this country, when you start looking at the carbon markets, what we want as farmers is a recognition of those that are already doing those practices. And that's one of the big fights we're putting out there. You've got so many, especially organic, that are following measures which do benefit the environment, do reduce the carbon. I'm not an expert on science. I hate science, but it has to be recognized that they are actually doing this. It's not going to be a new practice. But some of the regulations that they're thinking of doing will be to pay farmers if they adopt these practices.
That's what I'm trying to.
Organic farmers are already doing it and have done it, and they've conserved everything. So again, that's a big issue which I think we need to address. And to make sure farmers get paid what it's worth once they decide how much, what value is a bit of carbon.
Are you in communication with Secretary Tebbett's task force?
I did speak to Diane a couple of times.
And do you know if they're looking at the assembling loads across companies question as a possibility?
I don't know.
Okay, okay.
I've been very careful because you've got a task force in Maine, you've got a task force in Vermont. You have they haven't set up a task force in New York yet. And, you know, our role with NODFA is to look at the whole region and how we can make sure that we can get a solution that benefits every farmer wherever possible, but keep bringing these ideas up and suggestions up.
We have different circumstances, you know, Nicole's data showed 23 farms in a county, so maybe you could assemble a load more easily there than in Maine where they're more diffuse and there's fewer of them. So, you know, might be different, even though it's a regional plan, have different solutions targeted at different circumstances.
Right, right. And I think each state has got different benefits they can pass on to the consumer. But again, you know, every group of farmers that have tried to market their own milk have ended up failing. And it's a very, very cutthroat business.
Very difficult.
Very difficult. And, you know, I've done it a few times with different groups, but it is very, very difficult.
Jackie has a question. Go ahead, Jackie.
Well, it's more of a comment. Thank you, Senator. We're talking about hauling issues and subsidizing. I would just like to remind us that today we're talking about organic, but this task force is looking at the dairy industry as a whole. And I would have loved to have had a $900 hauling fee. We're 3 miles from the Cabot plant. And because the way the co-op set us up, we pay hauling charges as if our milk was going to Boston. So when we're looking at subsidizing transportation costs or giving credit to farmers who, you know, in our case, when we were milking, we were shipping 3 miles away, but we were getting dinged for hauling costs to Boston. If that's going to be part of the regenerative conversation, then we have to look at all those things. Because I also worry when I hear about marketing on regenerative agriculture, I have not yet heard a definitive definition of what that is. I know House Ag has talked about it. I know Senate Ag has talked about it. But if we don't get a handle on this definition, we're going to get all these rogue marketing campaigns where it's like almond juice is what I call it, because it isn't milk. So we're going to have to get ahead of that conversation sooner than later. And also, if we're considering hauling as part of a carbon footprint, we're going to have to look at the conventional farmers and how they are getting how their cost is sometimes not reflective of what their practices are.
So,
one final comment on pay price, because whenever I hear Travis or somebody from Organic Valley, they talk about the pay price for organic being so much above the conventional price, which is irrelevant. It costs more to produce organic dairy than it does to produce conventional dairy for any number of reasons. University of Vermont and Maine have studied this. So, you know, at this point, the average base price is around $31. Then you get the added components going on that. So if you're lucky, you might get up to 33, 34. The University of Vermont and Maine, in their study, the production cost for organic in New England was 36, 37. And
oh boy.
And the grass-fed guys used to get $5 a hundred more. It's cut down to $1. So
oh boy.
They're actually losing money more because they've got less production and they've got to.
So they're $3 under the cost of projected.
At this point, organic dairy in the Northeast is at least $3 under
That's just about in line with our conventional guys, because they get about 17,
Yeah.
they should be getting 20.
That's where it's,
Well, Cornell says they should be getting 22, 23, and so, you know, there is, you know, I, from my point of view, you know, organic farmers and conventional farmers, they're in the same boat. They're getting, you know, they're not the ones making the money.
But it doesn't trickle down to the farm even with organic.
No. And the cost of organic milk on the shelf hasn't varied since I've been taking records, which I started back in 2006. It's always just around that $4 mark. Not for the store brand, and 60% of at least 60% of organic valley crop milk goes in the store brand. Their own brand is way down the list on what they sell. So they made a decision about 10 years ago to shift away from their own brand and supply these store brands, simply because it's easier for the
Private label.
processing private label, because
Yeah.
all you do is you take it to a processor, you start packaging it, and you set it up. But private label is also very competitive because you've got the large dairies from Colorado and Texas shipping their milk in on a private label. So
No, they aren't shipping it east, are they?
Yes.
Now, how can they afford to ship this way, but we can't afford to ship that way?
because they ship it as packaged product.
Yeah, but that should cost more.
Ultra pasteurized packaged product. So it's cheaper to ship packaged product than it is to ship raw milk.
See, we've always,
yeah, that's turned the dairy industry upside down.
The ultra packaging, every supermarket and every warehouse expects it to be ultra packaged now, ultra processed.
Yep.
So
so
that
it
is,
doesn't have to be refrigerated.
they refrigerate it, but it doesn't really have to. You know, so the date code could be, they put a date code on it just to keep consumers happy. There really isn't a date code.
Because years ago, we talked about processing plant here in the state and you know, we should maybe have one to ship south, and no, it's so much cheaper to ship 60,000 pounds in a tanker and process it in Boston or New York. Then you don't want to package it up here in little gallon cartons and then have to truck the cartons and
The whole business was built on that model.
Right.
Yeah.
Now it's dependent on the because what you really need in Vermont is a moderate sized, modern processing and packaging plant that can do ultra pasteurized, that can also balance its own product with its powder. So they can balance it themselves within the plant with both powder and butter.
Yeah.
And ultra pasteurized, it could be both conventional and organic. You could do one first and second one each day or whatever, but with enough different silos, so you could take small quantities of milk from different places and do it for the niche value-added product.
Oh.
I don't have $50 million. So.
crazy. Any other questions for Ed?
Very helpful, Ed. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for the time.
Well, thank you very much.
And,
Yeah.
Good luck. Let me know if I can scare up anybody else.
Okay.
I think we're gonna need a little luck.
I appreciated what you said about Secretary Vilsack's task force being like a lifetime ago. In some ways, it is. Yeah, really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it was a good education for me.
yeah, I
Very
bet.
interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess we're wrapping it up, folks. It's been a long meeting. Did you want to go over that partial schedule?
Oh, yeah.
Dan can run through our quick sketch of what we've gotten so far put together for our next meeting. If that'd be helpful, and then we can get you a copy sent to you as well.
So,
I'm just gonna take a quick break. Yeah. Right.
got a cup for you if needed, John. So our next scheduled meeting is, that we put on the schedule, the last meeting is September 27th. So we've built out a pretty good agenda for that meeting around proposals for change and reports that are out in, have been published. Sustainable Jobs Fund, the Water Collaborative, the Milk Commission. And so now we're organizing the next meeting, which is it the 12th of October? Mike, is that right?
Yep.
So we're planning on the day after Indigenous Peoples' Day on October 12th. And we're starting to put that agenda together, and so that's where Jackie and John, have the Cheese Council come in and some of the folks that you guys have suggested, but any additional thoughts that you have for us, and I think that's where we'll try to slot in some further discussion about hauling and Grafton and Thomas Dairy, and begin to start looking at options of what we might do. So that's where our planning is at this point, is September 27th scheduled, and with an agenda, and we're building the agenda now for October 12th. And then probably have another meeting would be the 25th. So start meeting twice a month now on a regular basis.
Are those dates okay with you folks in your calendars? Randy got caught up today in double scheduling, and what day is the 27th? Monday?
Monday, yeah, so 2 weeks from today will be next. John, we have a meeting for the 27th scheduled, and then the next is the 12th of October, hopefully works. And then looking out 2 weeks from that would be the 12th is a Tuesday, because Monday is the holiday. And then, the 25th would be the next meeting. One other date, I'm sorry there aren't more people might be interested. Senator Gillibrand has been talking about holding a hearing for quite a while, and it's going to be on Wednesday. It's scheduled, and I can't remember if it starts at 9 or 10 in the morning, but there's a link on the Senate Agriculture Committee website to be able to listen in on that. The agenda she had talked about covering a variety of issues if you read about her original release for it. But at this point, the only thing that's scheduled for consideration is change to the federal order program. As of Friday, when she put out the announcement, that the panel hadn't yet been disclosed, but supposedly today the panel as of who is testifying is going to be available. So that will be, I think, the first real look at a change to the federal order program that we've seen in quite a while. So that should be interesting. This Wednesday, day after
Dan, is that
tomorrow.
is that on the U.S. Senate Ag site? You're not talking about
Yes.
Senator Starr's?
Yeah,
It's on, yes,
yeah, no,
okay.
US, yeah. Senator Gillibrand is the chair of the subcommittee on dairy. And I can't remember if the link is on the subcommittee website or the full committee website, but it's on one or the other.
Okay.
John, do you have a question?
Yeah, Bobby, somebody probably heard this, but it didn't come up today. Was of those 28 dairy farms, how many cows are we talking? We talked about how many pounds of milk.
Yeah,
Has anybody heard?
Well, if you took the average size and we were told
That's
the
the other way to
average
do it.
size,
Right.
multiply that by the number, and
Or you could do,
Yep.
Diane said 22 million pounds and think 15,000 pounds of milk per cow. So divide 22 million by 15,000 would be the other way.
But
Yeah.
don't forget that includes the 2 New Hampshire farms, and it doesn't include 5 yet of the
Yeah,
Vermont
right.
farms that we
Yeah.
need to interview.
Yeah.
So
So that would be,
sure yet. I think that
That would
that information is resting at NOFA. Jen Miller's in charge of it because she and Mike Thresher from Morrison Feed were doing the interviews of the farmers. I'm on that subcommittee, so we're still waiting for all that information to come back. And when it's available, I think Jen's going to do an aggregate posting and let us know those kinds of figures.
And we knew
so
it
that's
was
the
less
ball,
than
that's the
LFO.
ballpark time. Yeah.
Yeah. It just to give constituents a sort of idea of how many cows we're talking to, like an LFO. And the other thing I wondered, Dan, you might know this is
So
thinking.
it's probably. Oh.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Well, Diane said something about most LFOs produce more milk than these. So you're probably talking, 4, 5.
Well, I just do the math.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
get that far. I can't do that in my head, so
Well, 10,
but
12,000.
I used to be able to do it in my head, but not anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, since you lost your hair.
No, it's a more recent occurrence than that.
Dan,
Yeah.
the other thing
Yeah.
I just wondered about was if there's any precedent for a region having a statute that, in this, say this is an example of the Northeast having to end up with 50% of the dairy they sell has to be made in the Northeast. Are there any, does it run into interstate commerce conflicts, or are there any examples of that sort of thing being done?
Yeah, I probably would run into interstate commerce issues. I think if you tried to enforce an origin on another state's production, that would be interstate commerce.
So we can do it
it's not-
nationally.
We're correct. That's correct. And it's not necessarily an absolute prohibition. The interstate commerce weighs the burden against the benefit. So, have to kind of think it through a little bit. And it's conceivable that if there isn't that great a burden and the benefit is great, if health comes into it with food, which it does, then, but yeah, basically the law of interstate commerce would come into play if you tried to do that.
Yeah.
And hence there isn't much precedent for it.
Right.
So
I think
is there anything else?
But Jackie's talking.
I just,
Jackie,
in response to Representative O'Brien's question, I think the challenge with that would be if we tried to do that, knowing that Massachusetts couldn't supply their own 50% of their own milk, what do you do then? I mean, that's why Vermont does so well, because we make so much and ship it out. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Even if you got agreement, even if you could get agreement on it, like John's talking about, you'd still run into the law of interstate commerce at that point.
Anything else anybody wants to bring up? If not, we'll call it a wrap. And Mike, if you can hear me, I'll see you at 4 o'clock at our next meeting. Take care.